Hi everyone, my name is Alyssa, and for my poster presentation, I wanted to focus on the gender and identity aspects of roller derby. Excuse me. Roller derby is a really special sport to me as I had played it when I was in high school, and what had attracted me to the sport was that it had this whole not cult-like, but cult classic, um, really tough feminist subculture to it. And I will also be auditioning in the fall to be a part of the Texas Roller Derby Women's League here in Austin. So a little bit of background about the sport. Roller derby originated in the 1930s as a co-ed full contact sport. Unfortunately, the sport ended up kind of dying out around the 1970s due to the oil crisis, because in order to hold these bouts in the warehouses with the banked track, the rised up track that is curved around the edges, the way that it is, it took a lot of resources, and it was just simply too expensive to hold these bouts. So the sport ended up dying out, and then in the early 2000s, roller derby ended up having this big resurgence by the Texas Roller Girls League here in Austin, Texas, and it's been going strong ever since. A little bit of background, how the sport works for those of y'all that may not know. So roller derby is predominantly played on what I had mentioned before, like a banked track. It's like this big oval, curved track. It's risen up off the ground quite a few inches, and it curves in the middle. And that's, I think, largely why the sport was seen more as entertainment rather than an actual sport. Although in more recent times, the game can also be played on what is called flat track, which is just flat ground. So a little bit of breakdown about how the game works. So each game is an hour long. Games are called bouts. And each bout is split into two 30-minute halves with a 15-minute intermission in between. During the games, the makeup of who is on the track at one time, there's going to be 5 players from each team. In the positions of the jammers, there's going to be 1 jammer per team. Those are the ones that score for their respective team. The way that they do that is they get a point each time that they pass a member of the opposing team. And then they're going to be what they call a pivot. They are secondary to the jammer, and they're also allowed to score. And then finally, the 4 blockers per team are the ones that are supposed to make sure that the jammer from the opposing team does not get through the pack, so to speak. During the bout, they are made up of dozens of 2-minute jam sessions, and that's going to be when the players have the opportunity to play and score, and then there's going to be 30-second intervals of rest in between each 2-minute jam. It is quite an intense game. You are expected to wear full pads, helmet, wrists, knees, elbows, and even a mouth guard. People have gotten very seriously injured in this game, myself included. So injuries are quite prominent, even with all the padding, and that kind of fuels why this sport became so popular and its resurgence as a largely feminist sport and feminist phenomenon. And a bit about that is it largely became a really big feminist sport, I think just due to cult classics and having it was a sport where women were welcome to be able to do full body contact, especially on roller skates. It wasn't very heard of, and the way that the culture has, or the way that roller derby's culture has really developed over the years, the players have really cutesy nicknames. A lot of the time the players wear like fishnet stockings, or they wear like really cute little like mini skirts or booty shorts. They're like covered in glitter, and it became like a really like largely attractive space and sport, because it does challenge a lot of the societal expectations of femininity, being soft, not taking up too much space, not being aggressive, which all of those things, like, you do have to be able to lead with in order to excel in the sport in particular. Despite roller derby having always been a co-ed sport, it became a huge safe space during the resurgence to a lot of marginalized communities, particularly ethnic minorities, and also largely the LGBT community. This became like a really, like, while I think culturally like great, it became like a wonderful like way for a community to be built. And also it has like a really large aspect of like the do-it-yourself kind of like punk rock and roll culture, where it's kind of become more of like a radicalized sport now. So even though like roller derby, like I said, it's always been a co-ed sport, and there even are leagues that are largely male dominated, politically it has gotten a lot of controversy. A lot of people really kind of have the mindset of like, well, we work so hard to build this safe space, now why would we, introduce like folks that maybe would like make us uncomfortable or make us feel like, we're being challenged by societal standards of like femininity. And that's really not the goal like of the sport. There are organizations that do designate the men, and specifically the men and the women's leagues like for roller derby, and those are the Women's Flat Track Derby Association, and also like the Men's Flat Track Derby Association. And the Women's Flat Track Association had like released like a big statement just saying basically that they really welcome genders or any gender identity, all inclusive, for those that want to play the sport itself, and also those who want to volunteer to be like the referees and the support staff for the bouts. In conclusion, roller derby has always been an inclusive space, despite its like resurgence being predominantly like female and non-binary represented. It's always like been like a very like inclusive sport to whoever like wants to play can play. There should not be any barriers to having that as its there should not be any barriers to having that as its reputation. And largely there's not that many accessible spaces in like traditional sports for like all-inclusive identities like this. And so I think that that's like really largely important to remember, that while that sports really just should not be divided based on gender. And I know that's a really hot topic in modern traditional sports as well. But yeah, that is my presentation, and I hope you enjoyed it.